estate license exams for dummies. Part 5. You want how much? Evaluation and financing of real estate. Chapter 17. Investing in real estate. In this chapter, getting in gear with investment basics, recognize investment organizational structures, checking out ways to acquire investments, ranking in cash with investments, understanding the government relationship with investing, finding out how to analyze a real estate investment. Chapter 17. Investing in real estate. Real estate long has been considered one of the best ways to build wealth. A real estate agent who provides services to people who are buying and selling investment properties need to be knowledgeable about different types of investment properties, various ways you can make money by investing in real estate, and some of the tax issues that affect the real estate as an investment. Although you don't expect to become an investment analysis or financial advisor, state exam writers do expect you to know the basics of real estate investing. In this chapter, I tell you about the basics of real estate investing, including types of investment properties, how money is made in real estate investment, and how the government helps real estate investors through its tax policies. I'll also take you through a brief investment analysis and talk about how you can invest in real estate without actually owning any real estate. The info I'm giving you here is only what you need to help you pass the exam. If you decide that you want to find out more about investing in real estate, check out the most recent edition of Real Estate Investing for Dummies by Eric Tyson and Robert S. Gisson, John Wiley & Son Inc. Focusing on property investment. Many people think that real estate investment must involve large, complicated properties, and that isn't necessarily true. And real estate investors often start out with small residential properties close to home. I briefly discuss types of properties, management issues, particular advantages and disadvantages, and getting help with your client's investment. With the exception of a list of investment properties, you can expect some state exam questions on all of the materials in this section. Stopping by the way to grandma's house. Location is an important factor in selecting the type of real estate, including investment properties. All other things being equal, location is the primary factor affecting the value of property, but location plays another role when selecting an investment property. I once heard a piece of real estate investment advisor that I'll pass on to you. You may want to pass it on to your clients. When you buy a piece of investment property, or you want someone to select a piece of property to buy, make sure it's located where the owner passes it twice a day. The way to work on the way home or from work. This wisdom may be an idealized exaggeration, but to get the point, even if the owner doesn't manage the property, the fact especially the owner doesn't manage the property, always knowing what's going on, not only on the property but also the neighborhood is important. So many choices, examining different investment properties. An investment property can be almost any property for which people are willing to pay rent to use. I'll show I may have left something out. Lighthouses, lease to the Coast Guard. Maybe here is a pretty complete list of the different categories of investment properties. 1 to 4 family houses. These are sometimes 1 to 4 family houses. These are sometimes called duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes in some parts of the country. Essentially, they're small houses with 1 or 4 apartments. One investor can purchase them, and sometimes the other occupies one of the apartments and rents the others. Apartment buildings. These are distinguished from the 1 to 4 family houses by the number of units, which may be anywhere from 5 units to 100 of these units in a single building. Large residential complexes. This term is used to describe residential developments of several buildings, each of which contains multiple apartments. These complexes can consist of several high-rise buildings or low-rise, 1 or 3-story buildings called garden apartments in some parts of the country. Individual retail stores buildings. These buildings house department stores or smaller stores that usually have products and goods for sale. Strip malls and shopping centers. Open air complexes of retail stores known by either of these two names, often depending on whether there is a small strip mall or a large shopping center group of stores. This type of retail complex is known as accommodating automotive traffic with sufficient parking areas. Enclosed retail malls. The term refers to large complexes or retail stores, usually all joined together in an indoor climate controlled configuration. These are also characterized as extensive parking. Office buildings. These buildings are used for all kinds of offices, ranging from medical to business offices. Warehouses refer to a large building usually used for storage. Motels and hotels. Buildings can be configured in a low-rise, 1 to 2-story structures along the highway, or high-rise buildings in the center city location known as motel and the hotels, respectively. Industrial properties. The term refers to factory buildings. Vacant land. The term applies to land with no building on it. It purchases either to build something or to select the purpose, simply waiting for the price to rise. They can also be leased to adjacent property owners for various purposes. Land generally isn't considered a good investment unless it's being purchased on to build on. For more about vacant lands, check out the section Empty Promise, Considering Vacant Land, later in this chapter. Although you're not likely to get many, if any, questions about real estate agents' role in investing about buying properties, it's important to know something about how investors think so that you can help them achieve their investment goals. Generally, your role is to search out the type of properties they want, see the previous list, and obtain reluctant financial information so that the client accountant can check out the numbers to see if you can get a return they want. If you can find out more about the investors expect to make money later in this chapter, in the section called Making Money by Investing in Real Estate. For investors who don't know how much about investing, you have to provide some advice on financial returns and management issues. You can read more about management issues in the next section. In charge. Looking at management issues. One of the biggest decisions you first must make is whether to invest in real estate at all. Secondly, you have to select the kind of property in which you plan to invest. How you plan to manage your property is the important issue in making a decision. The two basic choices are managing a building yourself or hiring a manager. The decision usually is based on investors' competency and experience with the kind of building location, and amount of time you have available for management duties, and whether the investment produces enough income to make hiring a manager possible. Many investors start by investing in small residential properties, such as a 1 or 2 family house close to home. They're usually familiar with the residential properties, and close proximity enables them to keep an eye on the property, so self-management may be feasible. More of these kind of investments usually don't provide enough income, or at least initially, to pay for outside management services. On the other hand, someone who never has owned an office building before and has no familiarity with the needs of the people who rent office space probably will hire a professional manager, because an office building is used primarily during the day. Providing an office management or at least service people during business hours may be necessary. The office building is also more likely to generate enough income to support a property manager's salary. Your real estate agent may be asked to advise a client about property management issues and possibly recommend a property management company. The agent should try to understand his client's needs and experiences as well as possible. Make recommendations with the understanding that any decision lies with the client, and always recommend at least 3 reputable companies. See the rules of 3. Sidebar in this chapter. For more about property management and the duties of property manager, see chapter 3. The rule of three. When recommending another professional's or tradesperson services, a real estate agent should always recommend at least 3 people. Doing so minimizes the chance that you could be held liable in court of other professionals' incompetent actions or advice. In an area where people you successfully sue for damages is because they spilled hot coffee on themselves, I suggest you don't even think about the possibilities too much because it will give you a headache. What the lawyers tell me is that recommending at least 3 people, the person to whom you're making the recommendation has a chance to use his or her own judgment in a final selection and therefore bears at least some of the responsibility for the final choice made. So if you don't recommend an attorney, an accountant, or other professional tradesperson, always recommend 3. And I must add, make sure that these people you recommend are professionals you rely on yourself. Remember, every time you recommend someone else services to your real estate clients or customers, you're putting your reputation online. Ask the experts. Knowing when to get help. Investing in real estate is an important decision. Locating the right property for investors and selling investment properties is also you'll be doing as a real estate agent. Knowing what you don't know is as important as knowing what you know. Good advice is critical in making this right decision and maintaining that investment. The 3 people who need to be consulted in real estate and making real estate investment decisions are the real estate agent, that's you, an attorney, and an accountant. These professionals need to be consulted as early in the process as possible. I covered the agent's role in finding properties and handling management issues in the previous 2 sections, but you also need to check out the role of an attorney and an accountant. Make sure that you always refer your clients to these professionals as soon as possible. Consulting an attorney is important anytime you buy property, and doing so becomes more important whenever you're buying property with a partner or several other people. See partnering up, real estate investment organization structures later in this chapter. An attorney can help you set up a proper organizational structure for an investment. You may also want an attorney to review any leases that exist in the building you buy. The use of a good accountant, likewise, is crucial to becoming tax implications of owning investment properties. I talk about tax benefits and getting Uncle Sam's hemp, the government's role in investing later in this chapter. The point to remember is that the value of tax benefits derived from the same building sometimes vary from one owner to the next. Oh no, some not so good news about investing in real estate. Investing in real estate is a great idea for several reasons. Over time, real estate values tend to at least keep pace with inflation, if not exceed it. Properties often generate annual returns, income on investment. The investors can take advantage of tax benefits that may not be available in other investments. However, investing in real estate also has a few disadvantages. Here are 4 of them. Real estate isn't considered a liquid investment. Unlike stocks or bonds, it takes time to get your money out of the real estate investment. Real estate investments usually require substantial amounts of cash as a down payment. Despite what the no money down gurus say, reserve cash is also needed for unexpected repairs and vacancies. Real estate investment may usually require some level of management and involvement in the property management decisions too. Real estate investment don't always turn out to be profitable. All investments carry risks. Real estate is no different. Although an agent wants to present the investment property in the best possible light, the important thing is that you provide a potential buyer with factual data on current income, local variance rates for the type of property, and the physical condition, if known, of the property. You can guarantee very little about an investment unless you have a really good crystal ball. Partnering up, real estate investment organizational structures. People invest in real estate as an individual or sometimes together with another person or several other people. Different organizational structures are used to accomplish different investment goals. Does it surprise you to find out that you can invest in real estate without actually owning property or have ownership responsibilities? You don't have to become an expert in this area, but in this section I talk about each of these types of ownership and investment situations in enough detail to enable you to distinguish one from another, which is what state exam writers expect you to know. Real estate investment syndicates. The real estate investment syndicate is an ownership structure in which a number of people join together to invest in a single project or property. The term syndicate or syndication is more of a descriptive than a legal term or an actual form of ownership. And the actual legal structure of a syndicate is also takes a number of different forms. You can find out more in Chapter 7. The key point to remember about syndicates is that they are created to invest in one piece of property. Private syndicates usually involve a small group of people, sometimes already known to each other. Public syndications involve a large group of people, which may offer investments to public in the form of securities or shares. Depending on factors such as the total number of investors and the value of the investment, a syndicate may be subject to federal and state security laws designed to protect the public, which commonly are referred to as blue sky laws. Two forms of syndicates used for real estate investment are general and limited partnerships. A principal difference between the two forms is the existence of management control and liability. A general partnership, all partners share management responsibilities, profits and losses, and liabilities. If, for example, a partner are successfully sued and insurance can't cover the judgment, each partner can be held personally liable for the judgment. In a limited partnership, the partner usually is known as a general partner is ultimately responsible for any losses or liabilities in the project. Limited partners are entitled to certain profits and losses if they are beneficial to the tax situation, but the partners have no management responsibilities, and their losses are limited to the amount of their individual investment. For more about partnerships and other forms of real estate ownership, see Chapter 7. Real Estate Investment Trust. Real Estate Investment Trusts, REITs, are trusts designed to pool the money of multiple investors in real estate projects. Real estate investment trusts are like stock investments or multiple funds that usually invest in a series of projects. Real estate investors or more investments or mortgages, the REIs can continue as old investments or sold as new ones or as bought. REIs are available in their different types. Equity trust, a REIT that invests in a number of different kinds of real estate and sell shares to investors. Mortgage trusts, a REITs that uses shareholders' money to buy and sell real estate mortgage loans rather than properties. Combination trust, a REITs that investment shareholders' money in property equities and mortgage loans. Real estate mortgage investment conduits. The real estate mortgage investment conduit, REMIC, is a type of investment tool that uses shareholders' funds to invest in mortgage loans. A REMIC may sound like a mortgage trust, but there's more than two different beasts. A number of complex rules govern REMICs regarding the type of mortgages and investment payments to investors. None of these details is likely to be on the exam. In fact, REMICs may be only the wrong choices in the question about real estate investments to keep your eyes peeled. Spending spree. Acquiring and building investments. An investor may buy one investment property and leave it at that. But great empires of wealth have been built by buying, selling, and holding multiple properties of investments. In this section, I talk about using borrowed money to increase profits in real estate investment. I also give you some information about buying one property, then another, and another. I also talk about one of the riskiest investments, land. For exam purposes, absorb the terminology, and wherever you see math, make sure you understand the basic ideas. Getting more for less. The joys of leverage. Leveraging is usually borrowed money to increase the return on your investment. One reason real estate is such an attractive investment is that other people's money is available for you to invest. The beauty of leveraging is the less of your own money you use, the higher the rate of return on your investment. You most likely use borrowed money to buy your home, which is also leveraging. But the fact is that buying your home for one reason and investing property for a different reason. The advantage of leveraging a real estate investment have a direct bearing on the profits you make on the property. The formula for calculating the percentage profit based on used borrowed money, namely using leverage to increase profits, is a two-part equation. Part 1, selling price minus the purchase price equals profit in dollars. The second part of the equation presumes that, of course, there is profit. Leveraging doesn't really matter if there's a loss. Part 2, profit divided by cash investment equals the percentage of profit. Here are two examples of leveraging at play. You buy an investment property for $500,000 with $100,000 of your own cash and the rest financed with the mortgage loan. After several years, you sell the property for $600,000. You made a profit of $100,000. Now here's the good part. You made a profit at $100,000 on only $100,000 investment because all the cash you put up. If you do the math, part 1, $600,000, the selling price, minus $500,000, the purchase price, equals $100,000 profit. Part 2, $100,000 profit divided by $100,000 cash investment equals 1, or 100% of profit. You buy the same $500,000 property, only this time you pay all cash. You sell it a few years later for $600,000. You made the same $100,000 profit, but the math this time is part 1, $600,000 selling price minus the $500,000 purchase price, which is $100,000 profit. Part 2, $100,000 profit divided by $500,000 cash investment equals 0.2 or 20% of profit. Comparing the first example with the second example shows you how you can make the same amount of money, $100,000, with only $100,000 investment, instead of trying for $100,000, all by using other people's money, namely the mortgage loan. For more about mortgages, see Chapter 15. Now that you've seen the basic leveraging works, think about the investors who have $500,000 cash. Instead of paying cash for one $500,000 building, he puts $100,000 cash into $500,000 buildings. Using the first example above, he would reap 100% profit on each of the buildings. He'll make a total of $100,000. Investing generally makes an investor as little of their own money as possible, and of course, make the most profit at the shortest time. Make sure that you can handle math questions calculating basic leverage, as shown in this section example, and understanding that leverage is a concept of using borrowed money to extend the impact of your own cash investment. You may ask, what about mortgage payments I'm making along with the wait until I sell a property? Don't those payments change the leverage equation? The answer is yes and no. Refer to the later section. Letting someone else pay off the mortgage, equity buildup, where I discuss equity buildup, which is paying off the mortgage principal through rents and other collections. The interest payment, as you also see, are accounted for in the cash flow calculation. And an investor may want to account for all of the of this in evaluating the profitability of the investment. A simple language calculation could be enough for you to get through the questions on the test they may ask. Pyramidings. Not enough pharaohs. Pyramiding is building multiple investments from one investment. You really need to think in terms of upside down pyramid or a triangle for this to make sense, especially if you start with one investment property and use the profits from it to buy two, then in turn to buy four. So the upside down pyramid has a pointy end down, and that's the one of the properties you start with. And from other pyramid expanding up and out as a result of your addition for more and more investment properties. You can either sell each property and buy more properties, or refinance a property and use the resulting cash to buy another or even two more. In pyramiding, you're always aiming to increase the total number of properties, rental units, and square footages you own. The downside of pyramiding is, of course, you increase your debt load, which is a very selective in the economic condition, sensitive to the economic conditions. And of course, investing in more and more buildings presumes an adequate profit greater than expenses. But pyramiding is one way that people build a real estate investment portfolio over time and end up controlling a number of properties. Empty promises, considering vacant land. Traditionally, real estate investment advice says to avoid investing in vacant land, meaning land that's underdeveloped. I'm talking about buying a piece of empty land and waiting for it to grow or appreciate in value. Sometimes people wait for a time to take its effect, hoping that property value will arise. Sometimes people are simply waiting for developments to reach the property or a new highway to be built. In these cases, investors aren't doing anything to add value to the property. Some people have made money with this investment strategy, but in general, vacant lands are not recommended as a good real estate investment. Vacant lands produce no income while you own it. The only profit to be made is when you sell it, and that profit usually depends on factors over which you have no control, which as there are a few roads to build. Meanwhile, you have to pay taxes on land and possibly maintain it in some way depending on whether it's located. On the other hand, if you do sometimes increase the value of the property, it may become a good investment opportunity. You may be able to build on it, get local governments to permission for commercial development, which usually is more highly valued than residential development. Vacant land also can be rented, leased on a long-term basis to someone who wants to build something on it. I'll talk about land leases in Chapter 12. Exam questions on this subject, if any appears, are pretty simple. Just remember that vacant land is not considered a good investment because it costs you money without generating income. Making money by investing in real estate. You can make money in several different ways, such as capital appreciation, renting, and equity buildup by investing in real estate. As an agent and as a test taker, you'll need to be familiar with all of the money-making methods and appropriate terminology. In this section, I covered the basics. The most important thing to keep in mind when you come to make money in investment is that an investor expects these two kinds of returns. Return of the investment. You expect to get back your capital, the cash you invested in first place. Return on the investment. You expect to receive something more than what you invested. The expected return on investment is related to the risk of the investment. The risk is any investment is possible of losing all or other parts of the original cash investment. The higher the risk, the greater expected to return on the investment. The several ways by which investors expect to accomplish the return of their investment and the return on their investments are covered in the following section. You're a real estate agent, not a fortune teller. After you get your real estate license, you're officially an expert in real estate matters. You may not feel like much of an expert, but the state that just gave you their license says you are. More importantly, the license tells the people that you're helping that you can trust your expertise because you studied, taken a real estate course, and passed the state exam. You and I both know that it takes more of completing a course, reading a book, 7, even this one, and passing the state exam to become an expert at anything. Mastering its many aspects of real estate will take time and focus. Investing in real estate is one of those areas. So what does this have to do with fortune telling? People who buy a piece of property, whether it's a house to live in, a store for their business, or an apartment building as an investment, want to be certain as possible that they're making a good investment, which means not losing any money down the road and probably making some. Because buyers of an investment properties are specifically buying the property to make money, new investors usually will want reassurances that they're making a good and profitable investment. Here's where the crystal ball comes in. Unless you have one of those they didn't give me when I was in a real estate license, you really can't say much about the future of any property. In fact, I tell my students in every investment class I teach that they can talk about a particular property or the market in general in the past and in the present, but never in the future. Remember, the states say you're an expert, and clients have every right to expect that from your business, and you rely on the advice, but nobody can predict the future. Focus your discussions on clients on current vacancy rates, market trends in the last 6 months or year, competing rental rates, and even publish economic reports. By avoiding telling the news investors how she can be assured that their vacancy rates will go down, her rents will go up, and the sun will always be shining, you'll be predicting any of those things, and save your crystal ball for predicting numbers when you buy a lottery ticket. Up and down, buying low and selling high, capital appreciation. One of the ways investors make money in real estate is by selling property at a higher price than which they bought it for in the first place. In this case, a value of real estate appreciates or increases, creates capital appreciation or growth. The profit made from selling property for a price higher than what was paid for is called capital gains for tax purposes. When you sell property for more than what you paid for, you are in return of capital. That is, you get the original down payment back along with the profits or capital appreciation, which in return on the capital. So if I buy a property for $500,000 with $100,000 cash, see getting more or less with the joys of leverage early in this chapter, and a few years later sell that property for $600,000, then I get my original cash investment of $100,000 back, return on my investment, and an additional $100,000 in capital appreciation, return on my investment. For more about capital gains, see more than the money is worth, capital gains, later in this chapter. Plenty of room. Rentals on properties. Most investors get returns on investment by means of rents paid on a property. All expenses, including the mortgage loan payments, are paid from the rents and whatever else, such as quarters from laundry machines, factories included in the building income. Investors call the mortgage payment debt service, and many left over after all expenses are paid, except for debt service, is called the net operating income. After debt services is subtracted from the net operating income, what's left is called cash flow, or the money that investors have earned before taxes. Check out the following part 2 of the equation. Part 1, building income minus operating expenses equals net operating income. Part 2, net operating income minus debt service equals cash flow. Cash flow ideally is positive, meaning that you take money out of an investment each year, but cash flow can be negative, meaning that the building expenses are greater than the building income. 3 reasons why someone buys an investment with negative annual cash flow are: the investor may believe that the shortfall is only temporary. Maybe the building isn't fully rented. An investor believes rents will go up faster than expected, or the expenses can be managed better and reduced. The investor may believe that when selling the building, it will make enough profit to make up for the negative cash flow each year. The investor may be making a lot of money in another investment and wants to keep this income tax bracket lower by balancing a positive cash flow investment against a negative one. Letting someone else pay off the mortgage equity buildup. The mortgage payment or debt service always is included in expenses of any investment property. If the borrower borrows money with the amortized mortgage, every payment made on the loan is part interest and part principal. That's what amortized means. So every time the building income in the form of rents and other income is used to make a mortgage payment, usually monthly, the overall mortgage debt is reduced. By paying off some or all of the mortgage loan, when the owner sells the property, he owes the bank less money than with the balance of the mortgage loan than when he first bought the investment. The owner gets to keep more of what he sells an investment for. Equity is the difference between the value of the property and all debts attributable to the property. Obviously, any increase in overall value of the property is also increases the equity. But investment, usually the term equity buildup, to specifically refer to the increase of equity that comes from the mortgage loan being paid off by rents from the investment property. For example, suppose you borrow $200,000 to buy an investment property that costs $250,000. You keep the property for 10 years, and through the monthly loan payments, which is coming out of the rents, you pay off $50,000 on the mortgage. Assuming the property doesn't appreciate in value when you sell the property, you owe the bank only $150,000. That's $50,000 you paid off of the mortgage is yours, courtesy of your tenant's rent. I discuss mortgage loans in Chapter 15. Getting Uncle Sam's help. Government role in investment. The federal tax code isn't just about getting Uncle Sam's help, the government's role in investing. The federal tax code isn't just about government figuring out new ways and exciting ways to take money away from you. Much of the code is devoted to encourage different kinds of business activities. Real estate investment benefits from several programs to help investors retain more of their profits. This section tells you about the most common programs, some of which involve a little math that exam writers want you to know how to do. I gave you the basics here, but don't forget the importance of hiring a good accountant on actually owning real estate investment. More than your money's worth. Capital gains. When you sell a property for more than you paid for it, you have made what a tax for tax purposes is called a capital gain. That gain is taxable, but because the government wants to encourage people to make long-term, usually more than a year, investments over time, it treats capital gains more favorable than regular income for tax purposes. Calculating the amount of capital gains that a property has earned starts with the basics of property. The basics is that initial price you paid for the real estate, not just the cash you put in. The basics can change over time because the cost of capital investment are added to it. Capital investments is a permanent improvement that adds value to the property, such as a new roof on the building or a new kitchen in the rental units. These new numbers, originally cost plus capital improvements, is usually still referred to as the basis. Depreciation, which the government's way of enabling you to claim a loss on your property, and which I discuss in the next section, is then subtracted from the total of the original cost of the property, the basis. Resulting numbers is called adjusted basis. Next, you subtract selling expenses such as commission expenses and closing costs from the selling price of the property. That total is called the net selling price. Finally, the adjusted basis is subtracted from the net selling price, and it results in a capital gain. The calculations that follow show the amount of capital gains for the property initially purchased for $50,000. A $50,000 purchase price or basis divided by, added 8,000 capital improvements minus 4,000 depreciation equals 54,000 adjusted basis. 90,000 selling price to the new buyer minus 5,000 commission expenses minus 1,000 closing costs equals 84 net selling price. So 84,000 net selling price minus 54,000 adjusted basis equals 30,000 capital gain. Tax laws change from time to time, particularly with respect to the tax rate on capital gains. Expect a question or two requiring you to calculate a capital gains to describe the basis or adjusted basis. You might even have to calculate the tax paid, but either the exam writers give you the tax rate to use or you use one to learn in your pre-license class. Feeling worn out. Depreciation. Depreciation is the recovery of the cost of an asset that wears out. Another term for depreciation is cost recovery. Allowing you to deduct the dollar amount of depreciation from the annual tax obligation is the government's way of acknowledging that the asset, a thing of value, wears out, and that you didn't have the asset, you couldn't earn any money on which you pay taxes. With depreciation, you wind up paying less in annual taxes on any given piece of property and keep more of your profits. The government wants you to pay taxes, no surprises there, for people who need physical objections like building, machinery, automotives, as soon see to earn their income and therefore pay taxes. The government understands that no physical object lasts forever, and without that object, you have no business and pay no taxes. Depreciation is the government way of acknowledging that these things wear out and helping investors replace these items so that they can continue earning income. You guessed it, continue paying taxes. Here's a non-real estate example, including the tax impact that you will use in class. Suppose that you have the smallest car rental company in the world with only one car. The car costs $40,000. You rent it out and make $60,000, and what usually is referred to as gross income before taxes and expenses. After gas, oil, maintenance, and insurance expenses, $4,000 are deducted. You end up with $12,000 left in your net income. You're in a 20% tax bracket, so your tax calculation is $12,000 net income times 0.2 equals 2,004 taxes. At least that's how much your taxes would be if the government didn't recognize the fact that cars wear out, and without a car you have no business. The government gets no taxes, so the government lets you deduct depreciation, enabling you to do so during what is called a cost recovery period, say 5 years on the car. So $40,000, the cost of the car, divided by 5, cost recovery period, equals 8,000 depreciation per year. So now, instead of deducting only $4,000 in expenses from the income, you can deduct another $8,000. $16,000 gross income minus $4,000 operating expenses minus $8,000 depreciation equals $4,000 net income. $4,000 net income times 0.20 equals $800 in taxes. A tax bill of 800 versus 2,000 and 4,000, courtesy of depreciation. Sounds pretty good. And you thought those guys at the IRS were only after your money. For more depreciation math, check out chapter 18. Investment properties benefit from the same depreciation calculation. However, the cost of recovery period for a building is longer than automotives, vehicles. And vacant land can't be depreciated at all because the land doesn't get old and worn out like a building. And a private home can't be depreciated because it isn't considered an income generating asset. The type of depreciation that is used for investment properties is called straight line depreciation. Because the equal amount of value of the building is deducted each year, government periodically changes the rules governing the cost recovery period. The recovery to make the changes of the question every time the federal government changes the tax laws. You probably won't get any questions on the specifics, but you may get questions about depreciation in general and how it works and how it affects the basics. The beauty of depreciation is that it's subtracted from annual income, therefore by reducing your annual tax burden. As the example shown, of course, you're most likely figuring out that because depreciation reduces the adjustment basis of the property, it increases the capital gains on which you'll have to pay taxes. But capital gains are traditionally given favorable treatment by the tax code, so ultimately you're paying less taxes on the capital gain than you would be on annual income. Check out this example for cost recovery period. You purchase an investment property for $1 million. Typically, the land values may be 20%, leaving the building value at $800,000. $1 million total property cost times 20% the land value portion equals $200,000 land portion. $1 million minus the $200,000 equals $800,000 building costs. If you use the cost recovery period of 25 years, the calculation is as follows. $800,000 building costs divided by 25 recovery period equals $32,000 per year in depreciation. This means each year for 25 years you could deduct $32,000 from the building's income before having to pay taxes. Just remember that the rules regarding depreciation include the cost recovery periods are complicated and can change from time to time and have different benefits for different investors depending on the particular financial situation and time on the accountant. Time to get that accounted. On the way down, tax deduction and tax credits. A tax deduction is something you can deduct from an investment property income to reduce your taxes. A tax credit is something you can deduct from your taxes you owe. The federal and sometimes state government creates programs that permit tax credits or deductions to encourage certain activities with respect to investment properties. Historic preservation and energy efficiency is the kind of things that the government periodically tries to encourage within certain limits. Property owners are permitted to deduct the investment on their mortgage loan and local property taxes. All things being equal, a tax credit is worth more in tax savings than in tax deductions. The credit is subtracted from taxes owed, and a deduction is subtracted from the net taxable income, your gross income with expenses. Most likely, the test will ask the question, which is more valuable? I doubt you have to do any kind of calculation. But there's an example anyway. The fact that the numbers are made up. Last year, the government said you could deduct $3,000 for any work you did that increased the energy efficiency of your house. This year, the government said you could take 3,000 tax credits if you did the same kind of work. If your net income, gross income after expenses, your building is $3,000 each of those years. I doubt you had to do this kind of calculations, but here's an example anyway. The facts and numbers are made up. Last year, the government said that you could deduct $3,000 for any work you did that increased the energy efficiency of your property. This year, the government said you could take a $3,000 tax credit if you did the same kind of work. If the net income, gross income from after expenses of your building is $30,000 in each of these years, then you have up to 20% tax bracket in which year you are better off. Last year's tax deduction: $30,000 net income minus $3,000 energy eviction deduction equals $27,000 net taxable income. $27,000 net taxable income times 20% rate equals $5,400 in taxes owed. This year's tax credit: $30,000 net income times 0.20 tax rate equals $6,000 in taxes. The $6,000 in taxes minus $3,000 in energy tax credits equals $3,000 taxes owed. For more about real estate taxes, see Chapter 16. Real estate exchanges. You don't always have to pay cash for a piece of property. You can trade just like you did with baseball cards. Well, not quite. Under certain circumstances, the government allows you to exchange one piece of property for another. These exchanges are known as 1031 exchanges. After the section of the law that governs them, a tax-deferred exchange, because one of the advantages is that the deferred of capital gain taxes. I discussed capital gains and more than money worth capital gains early in this chapter. You don't have to get technical in terms of what to remember about exchanges, but here are a few facts and terms you need to remember for those exams. Like kind. To qualify for exchange, the two properties must be of like kind according to the IRS definition, and they must be investment properties. Time limits. Exchanges generally have time limits during which the exchange properties must be identified, and then the exchange itself completed. Boot. If properties are exchanged and don't have the equal value, even if one of the properties have increased in value, the capital gains tax is deferred, but it eventually must be paid when the property is sold. If the properties are not equal in value, cash or personal property may be included in the deal. This is called boot. The person receives it owes taxes on the boot. By numbers, analyzing investment properties. As a real estate agent, you'll be called upon to provide information to investors about investment properties. Building conditions, maintenance issues, and location issues are important in any real estate purchase. But much of the information in real estate investment is about income and expenses for the property. Although you probably won't conduct an investment analysis yourself, you'll still expect to know something about numbers and how analyzing an investors. The agent role is to provide the necessary information to potential investors so that the investors or the investors' accountant can perform the analysis. The beginning of a real estate investment analysis is the operating statement, which is also called the income and expenses statement. This statement, which usually is prepared to keep track of finances of the building and for income tax purposes, tackling the actual annual income and expenses for a building. The income tracked on the operating expenses is called the contract or the scheduled rent, which is the actual rent paid by the tenants. Because the operating statement is used for income tax purposes, it usually contains information about the depreciation and debt service, mortgage payments. I discussed appreciation and feeling worn out with depreciation earlier in this chapter. The second piece of information is the real estate investment analysis. Its current rent roll, and the rent rolls is information about the leases that exist, the rents for each lease, and the terms or lengths of each time remaining on a lease. For more about leases, flip to chapter 12. A third piece of information is the analysis is the market rents, which are the market will be paying for the kind of space or apartment in the building. Market rents may be different from contract rents for the particular building. The final piece of information in an investment analysis is one that creates by the investors or the person doing the analysis on investment behalf, called the pro forma. It is a financial statement for the building potential income and expenses by looking at the market rents for the kind of space being leased. Rather than the scheduled rents, a projection is made on the investment future. The pro forma is a look at what can be. A few noteworthy characteristics of pro forma are market rents rather than actual or contract rents are generally used, but actual rents for existing lease may also be used for certain circumstances. Income figures are based on the building being 100% occupied, even if it currently isn't, and the figures may include other buildings' income, such as from laundry machines. Other income, such as income to the building for something other than the regular rents. For example, a microwave antenna rental on the roof is actually added after the vacancy and collection loss calculators apply. If vacancy and collection allowance is used, even if the space in the building is 100% rented or a new building 100% vacant, expenses generally are rounded off. All figures are annual. Debt services isn't accounted for in order to arrive at the net operating income, but it is used to determine the cash flow. The mortgage is more about the owner's financial position than the value of the building. Depreciation is accounted for only after being before taxes cash flow is calculated. Depreciation is accounted for only after before tax cash flow is calculated in order to determine the tax consequences for the investment. The value of depreciation may vary with the owner's financial position. The basic numbers that you were looking for in a pro forma are the net operating income and cash flow. The basic formula for finding net operating income on a pro formula follows, but it will help you understand the formula if you first know the details behind some of the numbers called in the formula. Potential gross income. Market rent at 100% occupancy. On occasion where the building has long-term leases in place, you may use the lease rent, also called the scheduled or contract rents, minus vacancy and collection loss, used to account for periods of rent loss due to vacancy or bad debt, determined by examining other pro formas for the number they use. Consulting investment analysis and commercial lenders is always expressed as a percentage. Note that this isn't a vacancy rate plus other income that isn't usually the principal source of revenue for the building, such as roof antenna rentals and public parking garages, equals effective gross income, also called effective rental income. These are the funds that should be available to pay the building expenses, minus operating expenses. These are all of the expenses that an investor will have to pay to maintain and operate the building. Don't include the depreciation or debt service, equals the net operating income, NIO. This is the amount after all the expenses except the debt service and depreciation are subtracted from the building's income. Calculating the NOI is key steps in estimating the value of the investment property using the income capitalization method, something you should be familiar with, not only as a real estate student, but as a real estate investor. Refer to Chapter 14 to see how NOIs is used to determine value. Minus debt service, referred to the mortgage payment, equals before tax cash flow. The money an investor theoretically has left for the year after all the building expenses, including the mortgage, has been paid. I say theoretically because you'll have to pay off your uncle, that is Uncle Sam. By the way, the taxes before you can really walk away, whether your annual after the tax flow. Here is a simpler view of these formulas. Potential gross income minus vacancy and collection loss plus other income equals effective gross income. Effective gross income minus operating expenses equals net operating income. Net operating income minus debt service equals before tax cash flow. If you calculate the taxes owed on the cash flow and subtract it, you can get an approximate idea of the money you'll have to pay after your taxes, or what's called after-tax cash flow. I say approximate because not every expense that you deduct in your pro forma is a liable deduction for income tax purposes. For example, you can deduct the interest portion of your mortgage payments, but not the principal. Also, you can deduct the reserves because you don't actually spend them. In analyzing a building for investment, the return, the money you're going to make on your investment, as well as the money you'll get back on your invested return of investment, is calculated for a 1 year period, and for the project holding period, which is the length of time the investment is owed. And that was part 5. What? You want how much? Evaluating and financing real estate. Chapter 17, investing in real estate. Thank you.